We are now live. It has been a while since I've done a live stream on this channel.
Do I do the slap on this channel?
Yeah. Do the clap.
All right.
Oh, okay. Now we're live.
Now we're live. Okay,
now
it's official.
Live.
There we go. Sorry, I just had to do that.
No, you're fine. No, man, it's been a long time since I've been live on this channel.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels good to be back and talking fishing. And today we're going to really focus on our top baits of 2021. And basically the way we're going to lay this thing out, it's going to end up on a podcast as well. I was kind of briefing Alex before we hopped on, but this is going to go over on a podcast and live on Spotify, Apple, whatever else the podcast platforms are. But we're really going to be talking about our top baits and the progression of baits throughout the season and things that we expect for 2022. So that's the way we're going to break this thing down. But if you guys have any questions while we're doing the podcast, while we're doing the conversation, feel free to hit us up over in the comment section and we'll answer those as best we can or as quickly as we can. But I think it's going to be interesting because this was a unique season overall, is learning some new techniques and fishing some different baits and some baits that, we both have confidence in. So I'm going to start with a little introduction for the live stream or podcast, and then we'll dive into the actual content for you guys. What is going on, everyone? Thank you for joining us here on Benjamin Knott Podcast. We're going to be talking today with my man, Mr. Alex Rudd, about our top baits for the 2021 season. We're also going to use this as a time to recap our season, look forward into 2022 a little bit, and just discuss the successes we had, some things that we were able to accomplish this year, and the baits that help us do that. So without further ado, we're going to really dive into this thing and get to talking to Alex about the baits that we both had success on this season. What's going on, man?
The professionalism of that intro just has me so I can't even stand it. I mean, that was the most wonderful thing I've ever heard. I'm good. I'm here. I'm hanging out with you. We're about to do a live stream, talk about fishing.
And yeah, you went out yesterday, didn't you?
I'm eating some pecans and drinking a Diet Dr. Pepper while we do that. So, I mean, my life is good. Yeah, I did go out yesterday. I got my butt handed to me in a kayak tournament. Well, I mean, I didn't get my butt handed to me, but it definitely wasn't the best outing I've had, but it was good Angler of the Year points because that's kind of my overall goal of, this season with kayak tournaments. But, yeah, I got piss poured on for about, 3 hours, and then the fish quit biting, and it was just kind of sitting around and looking at the water after that.
Was this the first one of the year or second one? Or
number 2.
How many of them do they do?
We have, if you hadn't asked me, I'd have told you. I think we have 12 because I think we go essentially all the way back around the entire year. So we usually start in December and go all the way to I think October's our last one. And then we do, there's the state championship in November, which I'll probably qualify for this year actually. And then we just start right back in December again. So
that's nuts. So you guys literally never stop.
Never. We don't have
Especially,
to. So we don't.
Man, it's got to be cold. It's got to be miserable in January, February, March. Even right now, it's got to be miserable when it's raining.
It is. Yeah. January and February really aren't my two favorite months. That's like when it gets kind of sucky is January, February, because January, February in a bass boat is completely different than January, February in a kayak. Like when you're in a kayak and you're that close to the water and you're having to move, I move really slow. Like some people aren't as, I guess, intimidated by it as I am, but like I just am really intentional with everything I do when it gets that cold, because when you go in the water, it gets really hard to get back out of the water, even if you have a life jacket on and you got a really stable kayak. And so you got to be really careful. So I don't know. We'll see what happens though. Next month, I'm excited about it though, because it's on Norris Lake, and Norris is about 10 minutes from the house, and I know a lot about Norris, especially when it's cold and crappy outside. So hopefully I'll wreck the face.
It's miserable. When it's just absolutely miserable.
Like those days, that day I took you out there, that's the day you catch fish.
Yeah, exactly. When it's terrible. But that kind of leads us into this next topic, and that's kind of talking about our top baits of 2021, right? And a lot of times your fishing really, really kicks off for the season starting in February, March. Like that's what you would consider like the beginning of your fishing season in the year, right? And like a lot of times that's crankbaits for you, whereas mine would start in April, which is just a little bit later. But let's kind of basically work through the calendar year and start to talk about like what baits you had success with in the spring and in the pre-spawn, and kind of the success that you had or we had. And we'll work through the year that way, if that works for you.
Good. Sounds good.
I know for me, man, and I know it's similar for you. In the spring, I threw a jerkbait a ton this year. Like this year seemed like it was the spring of the jerkbait and the tube. And those were the two baits that really got me through. Like April was almost, I would say April was almost 100% like a max scent tube, because I got the opportunity to go down and do that Berkeley thing. And they got me a couple packs of those tubes for that. And I fished a tube so hard because they like wanted some content with them. And I was on St. Clair, which is like the land of the tubes. And I fished a tube basically until Caleb got here, and then I started picking up a jerkbait. But was it similar for you? Like, what did you throw around you?
Yeah, for me, it was as a jerkbait quite a bit in a Ned rig. I think the biggest reason for that is how cold it was. Man, we had an extremely cold winter last year. And so, several of the kayak tournaments that I fished, like January, February, and then, even going out and fishing in the boat, the water, I think at one point I put the boat in the water and it was like 38 degrees. I mean, so that's like extremely, extremely cold water for East Tennessee. And so that even gets to the point where it gets too cold for them to even want to try to eat a crankbait. And the few crankbait bites that I was getting, I would have like one hook, like right at the, the front of their mouth where they were just barely taking it over. And so I picked up the jerkbait and the Ned rig, and that was kind of what put a lot of work in for me until what it always does, which is we start getting all the rain in like March and April, and then it switches over. And, when that starts happening, those lakes start fluctuating. I like a square bill in my hand. I like a flipping jig in my hand, and I go do that. You know what I mean? And that was kind of what I did in March and April, was just the square bill, a lipless, and then a Ned rig too. I mean, dude, the Ned rig, it's going to be funny. This entire like time that we talk about this, the Ned rig is just going to keep coming back up. And I don't know if it's just because I figured out how I like to fish it or what it is. But man, when I figured that Ned rig out, it changed everything as far as like it changed what I look at and go, oh, I can fish a Ned rig on that. You know what I mean?
Well, and what's funny too is like a Ned rig for me is normally a huge player, and I don't think I threw a Ned rig, but maybe a little bit this year. Like if you'd asked me in the past couple seasons, I would say I threw a Ned rig a lot. I threw it from the beginning of the year basically to the end of the year. But I think because I was throwing that tube so much, like I was really trying to understand that tube bite. And to be frank, I had those max scent tubes and I really wanted to get content with them. Like I locked it in my hand and I just was putting in areas that I knew fish were at and I knew I could catch fish at. So like, I think that's why the Ned rig didn't get put in my hand quite as much this year. But it's such a powerful tool, man. And just like the tube, they kind of fish interchangeably. But I think the tube sometimes, especially now that everyone's throwing a Ned rig, I think the tube's starting to get a little bit better bites again.
Yeah. See, and I think down here, it's just the complete opposite. I don't think very many people, I'll tell you this much, people aren't using the Ned rig like I use the Ned rig. And that may change as people watch my videos. But like most people drag the Ned rig around, where I'm doing that ripping thing with it. Like I'm popping it off the bottom.
Cast.
Yeah. I'm target casting with it. I'm hitting specific things. I'm fishing current with it. I'm being really violent with it, using those extremely bright colors. And so I think that's kind of
heads, man. You're using that 3/16 quarter ounce head. You're not using like the 3/32 1/8 ounce heads that a lot of guys are using.
Yeah, and I'm getting it to the bottom fast and jerking it off the bottom fast and just so yeah, I don't know, man. It's been a strange year for me. I mean, like just looking back and thinking about it, when I did my top baits for 2021, most valuable baits for 2021. The list was even strange looking to me, just as far as like there was a few things on there I didn't expect to be on there, but were. And I think it's just, I don't know. Dude, fishing's changing. I'm like, I truly believe like a few years ago, we were in the good old days. And I'm starting to worry that we're getting out of the good old days and and we're starting to get into just a different phase of fishing, right? You got to do very different things.
I think it's also a perspective, or it's also a result of us learning different techniques, right? And becoming confident in different techniques. Because 3 or 4 years ago, man, I would not have picked up a tube. As much as everyone talks about how great a tube is, like I just really wouldn't have really gotten excited about throwing it. And so when I got the bait, I had to develop confidence in it this year. And so I really stuck it in my hand and forced myself to learn it. The other one for me, man, that jerk bait has only really become a player over the past probably 2 or 3 years for me. And like seeing, I was always of the impression that a jerkbait is a jerkbait is a jerkbait is a jerkbait, right? And like you can go out and you have a sinking jerkbait, you have a deep diving jerkbait, and you have a regular diver. But like one of the comments I want to talk about is like the Jacko re-range for me. That was insane. The power of this bait. Like when we went on St. Clair, it was all about the re-range, and you could throw another bait side by side with it, like any bait you wanted to throw. And for some reason, whether it's the sound or the tighter action of that re-range, like Zach was crushing us on it. And then Caleb took that bait and smashed us on it the next day with like me throwing a very similar color jerk bait. And this happened kind of very similarly or very often all the way throughout the spring for me. And then it kind of changed, right? Where like the re-range went away and I could pick up other jerk baits again. But it's really interesting to see like very, very key baits play a huge, huge role. And Caleb beat my eyes in with that thing. That's the only reason I bought that thing. Brennan's over in the comments. Brennan is like smelty. Dude, this is such an ugly color jerk bait, right? Like it's nasty looking.
Gets smashed.
But it crushes fish.
See, the rearrange for me, I threw it quite a bit this year. And I think what makes it so interesting is how freaking loud it is. Like there was several times in the winter that I would be throwing it and like I could hear it all the way back to the boat. Like I could hear that. And I mean, dude, I would have, like literally, like it is so loud. And when you throw it, it sounds like somebody shooting a gun. I mean, like when we were in the boat with Zach could take that thing and pow, we thought he was breaking it off every single time he did it. And man, like February, March time, I threw it quite a bit, especially like around the time that I was trying to fish that Hobie Open that came to Watts Bar. And I caught several fish on it, and it was just kind of seemed like, for me anyway, it was one of those deals when no other jerkbait would work, I could pick that thing up and like they would come investigate it quite a bit.
They're either on it or they're off it.
Or they're not.
It's a bait that they're really on, and that's like the only jerkbait, or they're not on it at all, and they won't touch it.
Yeah.
Like you got to have a different jerkbait. So it's a really unique bait, but that for me was really interesting to see how critical that bait was for the spring fishing. Kind of moving on, man. Like when you got up here, you were basically at the tail end of the spawn, right? Like the jerkbait bite was the big deal for me. But then I started pulling off on those fish, and I was starting to fish the outside grass lines, and a jig really started playing. And like
dude,
a jig,
smashed him.
Was so critical for me. And I think this is one of my favorite baits anyways, but it was really unique to see like how different profile jigs played differently, and how these fish related. And one of the jigs that I throw and pour is this jig right here. This is a little compact 1/2 ounce flipping jig. I'm actually going to have a video on how I make this bait over on the bait making channel, but it's a small jig. It's a 1/2 ounce with a sparky head with, I believe it's a number 4 Gamakatsu hook, but it's a really small profile, really, really good jig that I just caught a ton of fish on this year, man. And I think the compact jig also played like a big role for you too, especially after you left here.
Yeah, dude. I mean, when we were up there, we smashed him on a jig. And then I came home in like, end of June and like middle of June, really. And first day back, I went, grabbed a jig, that new Beast Coast, is that little Magnum 1/2 ounce green pumpkin, and went and caught a 20-pound bag on it. And I mean, just smashed their face in. And like this year, again, kind of like the Ned, it was the year of the jig. I mean, I caught so many fish flipping a jig and like flipping it all the same places I'd flip a creature bait, and where I'd flipped jigs before and not had success. For some reason, those fish were on the jig this year. And I mean, we smashed them. I smashed them. A jig was a big deal for me.
Well, the other thing too, man, is I went through about 1 billion packs of jigger craws this year. Like this was the year that I really picked that jig back up and dedicated myself to it. But I really did, man. I went through so many of these jigger craws, and all
that
of this
color right there too.
Jigger craw, but this pumpkin green flake, like this is such a good color that I don't think a lot of guys throw in. Berkeley is bringing back more colors. For years, it was 3 colors. It was green pumpkin, black and blue, and this pumpkin green flake. But this color here, man, is so dang good because I think it imitates the bluegill, and it also imitates those summer crawfish. Right? Once those summer crawfish start to molt and they start to get their shell back, they get that little bit of green in them. But I can't tell you, man, we probably went through 10 packs of chigger craws in the 4 or 5 days that you were here. We went through so many chigger craws.
And then I came home and just started stacking them up in the bottom of the boat. I mean, dude, it was crazy. And I'll tell you something else, just to kind of back up a little bit, that I did it while I was up there with you, was throwing a swim jig and throwing a flipping jig, but running that the Maxent meaty chunk up on there. And I had a lot of success in like March, April, May before I came up there with you, throwing that meaty chunk Maxent. And I mean, I don't know if it was the Maxent, if it was the meaty chunk, if it was super passive and didn't do a whole lot. But I mean, I caught a big key fish with Caleb down on Chickamauga one day with that thing. I think it was like 4 or 5 pounds. I caught a big key fish when I was doing a lot of that dam discharge fishing, throwing that meaty chunk, and just kept that thing in my hand and did really well. I actually got one rigged up when I head down south just to flip it around and just kind of see if the meaty chunk is still the deal.
You know what I mean? They're still
they're gonna smash the yeah.
I never really started throwing a meaty chunk, right? Like it was basically chigger craw all season from like the very beginning of the year when I went out and fished those cold water largemouth. I was throwing a chigger craw, but I do think jig profile has something to do with it, but also like skirt material. I'm a big living rubber skirt guy, so like if you look at this jig, it's not pretty, right? Like it has a little orange flash and just green living rubber, flat rubber.
Yeah, you're gonna have to make me some of those because those are just sexy looking.
Yeah, they don't look great, right? Like they don't look great out of the water.
I love it
when you flip them or you fish them. There's just something different about that bait, and it's a great little jig. But that chigger craw is the deal. I really, man, I need to pick up that meaty chunk though.
Yeah, you do. It's and what I do with it is I thread it, like especially on those compact jigs, I thread it up on the hook. I don't just hook it on. Like when I'm fishing, like that Beast Coast, like that double wide weed guard, I'll just thread it onto the hook because you want it that big profile, But like when I was flipping it early season, and even when I got back here and flipped it a little bit, you thread that thing up on there. And it's just, I think what gives me so much confidence in it is that I'm able to fish it as quickly as I would a flipping bait. So it's just like a creature hog for me, or that creature hog I can go dup, and flip it in, pump it, go. Flip it in, pump it, go. Flip it in, pump it, go.
You're talking about general or with that meaty chunk?
With the meaty chunk. With the chigger craw, I fish it a little slower, but I still flip it pretty quickly. But like with that meaty chunk, man, I can go whoop and like pump it twice. And if I don't pick up on it and it ain't swimming sideways, I keep on going. And I cover a ton of water. And I mean, I don't know.
Did you throw a swim jig a lot this year? Because that's a bait that normally like I lock in my hand in the spring, and I just never, I don't know that I ever really fished a lake that set up well for it.
I didn't hear anything you just said, but yes, I did throw a swim jig. Something happened to my headphones. I don't know. I need to get a new pair. They've been acting crazy. Last week or on Friday when we were doing live with the boys, Logan, and there was like at one point he said something, I totally lost it. But no, I did throw a swim jig quite a bit. When I was up there with you, came home, threw it a little bit, and then right here before it got cold out, fishing the grass lines, I caught quite a few on it. It was interesting because I would see those fish pushing the bluegill. Like you would be going down a grass line and there would be balls of shad as big as the deck of your boat swimming around, but those bass were keyed in on those bluegill, trying to kill them. And like they'd come up blowing up on them, and you just throw that swim jig in there and just start reeling it, and it would disappear, and I'd smack their face with it. But it's going to be something that this spring I throw a lot more because I feel like everybody's going to be throwing a bladed jig, right? Like last year at the beginning of the year in March, I caught them on that Blaze Orange, the Fire Crawl bladed jig. Well, I think it's because they'd never seen anything quite like that. I think this year with everybody throwing a bladed jig and throwing that orange crawl color, I'm going to go and throw like an orange crawl swim jig and see what they do with that, and just throw something completely off the wall and something completely different to see if I can get them to react to it. So,
yep. I'm with you, man. I actually want to go over with Brennan and fish the Mississippi, and he's like, dude, you can come over in the spring and we'll just go throw a swim jig. And that's a totally different world, right? Like fishing a swim jig on the Mississippi is different than fishing it on an inland lake here. So
that's I need to go fishing with him over there. Like, yeah, dude, that sounds like the Mississippi pre-spawn, spawn, and post-spawn just sounds like my kind of place. Like, yes, please.
Yeah, exactly. And then basically, man, you kept a jig in your hand a lot of the summer, right? Like that was a bait that you had tied on like all the time.
I had 2 rods. I had a creature hog on a 3/8 ounce weight pegged, and I had a jig.
Yeah, until the
literally
started
that's all
up,
I flipped all summer long. And the jig more than the creature hog. There was a time when the creature hog, they bit the creature hog. It was like that immediate post spawn time when they're kind of funky. But once they got hungry again, it was the jig from there on out until it got too cold to go and do the jig kind of thing.
Yeah. I also really got onto like the suspended fish bite, right? Like that was something that was kind of unique this year for me because I got into those Saturday tournaments and it was one of those things like I wanted to do something intentionally, wanted to do something different than what other guys were doing. And so I found suspended largemouth. And I really got on that Berkeley Spy and even the Duo Spy bait. But like throwing that chrome purple color, that was a bait that I threw a lot this year and caught a lot of big fish. But then that sort of translated into the fall because I've obviously done the suspended fish deal, right? Like that's something that I have confidence in. But in the fall, I started throwing the screw head a lot. And this is something that I'd not really thrown before. But I made some screw heads, which essentially is a jig head with blade behind it. And I fished this basically all fall long. Like this was a bait that caught me a ton of fish in the fall. And I paired it up like a 1-2 punch with the jerk bait. And this is a 112 plus one. But like those were really my baits from like the middle of summer into the beginning of fall, basically through the fall period. Those were the top baits, was that little screw head, a spy bait. I mixed in a drop shot a little bit when it kind of made sense to, and then that jerk bait. But that's really my season, was a handful of baits. It didn't really get super complicated.
Yeah, that was me too, man. I kind of noticed that when I was doing my baits video. I mean, it was like 4 or 5 things, and that was it. I mean, like, and it was fascinating because, you know, I switched to Abu Garcia this year. And so like when we first started working together, they couldn't get me all the rods and reels I needed right off. And I was really worried about it because normally I've got 6,000 different things tied on. But they got me a flipping stick, they got me a jerkbait rod, they got me a frog rod, and they got me a cranking stick. And I was good.
Some spinning stuff, yeah.
And some spinning stuff, and I was good. Like, and I've been good, and I'm still good, and I'll probably be good until, you know, and I've got a bunch of rods and reels out there I've just not even set up yet because, like, I'm good right now. And, like, it's just been really fascinating. I don't know if it's because I've started to simplify or if just the fishing is simplified. I don't know what it is. I mean, I can literally carry about 5 to 6 rods with me and know that I'm good with those 5 to 6, you know?
But if you start to look back at last season, right, like this season compared to last season, and then we'll use this to foreshadow, like, I feel like every single year it's different baits for me. Like there might be 1 or 2 that kind of translate from year to year, but a lot of times it's different baits. I think last year I threw a jerk bait a little bit. That was a pretty key bait, but I drop shotted so much last season.
Yeah, I didn't. I hate drop shot.
Well, right. But like, is it the same from like different baits season to season?
Yeah. I mean, last year, you know, for me, like the entire summer was consumed with throwing a wacky rig. This summer, a majority of my summer was consumed with throwing a Ned rig. I figured out that bite, you know what I mean? And the wacky rig was in there, obviously. You know, the year before in the winter, it was totally consumed with throwing a rock crawler in mud bug. This year, it was more consumed with a Ned rig and a jerk bait. You know what I mean? Like, it's those things. It's like just depending on how it goes down and kind of depending on where I'm fishing a lot more. Like, I'll figure out a bite on a lake and go fish that lake quite a bit. But, man, it's been interesting. I mean, dude, I caught a lot of freaking fish on a Ned rig this year. Like, a lot of fish on a Ned rig. I mean, there was one day
you cranked a lot in the spring, but beyond that, like, I really don't think you picked up a crankbait until, again, maybe this, like, the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, like March. Dude, March, we had all the lakes get jerked down in March, and then they got jerked back up. And when they jerked them back up, I thought, here's my chance. I can go catch them on a square bill. And I did. I took my square bill and my new one and went and caught a bunch on it. And then they jerked the lakes back down. And when they would jerk those lakes down, it would pressure those fish so much. Whereas before, I would just go out there and I would throw a crankbait and go, shit, they're not biting. Whereas this year, I go, I know a rock pile. I bet you I can go catch one on a Ned rig, and I would go to that rock pile and I would find 4 or 5 stacked up there, and I would salvage a day
instead of throwing a crankbait on the rock pile and blowing it out, right? Like there's a different approach there, and I think it's a little bit too of maturing between like our fishing style is maturing and going, yeah, I can probably catch and flip this jig still, and I can probably throw in there and maybe get one to bite a jig, but instead of just catching one out of there, how about I try to catch like all of them out of there? You know what I mean? I think it's a little bit of maturing in our fishing style too.
Yeah, it definitely is, and that's what's hilarious is I mean I've been fishing for shit as long as I can remember. I mean I don't know 20 years now. I mean, literally my first memory is going fishing. So I mean I'm 28. Let's say that I've been fishing for 20 years, and I still even now like do things like that. Like I'm like maybe I need to do this just to see. And that's kind of what the Ned rig was. It was like I went and fished a tournament, got my butt kicked, and then I thought, I'm going to go figure this bite out because I should have figured this bite out before to do well in this tournament. And like the day after the tournament, I load my kayak up and I go and I figure the bite out with the Ned rig. Well, then we get into this deep summer pattern. And I go and I'm in my boat and I'm looking and like, so one thing doesn't work. I go, well, I'm going to go find this other thing. Well, and it ended up being a Ned rig bite. And so then I figured out that Ned rig bite. And I think that's what's cool is it's kind of, I'm just adding, folders to the file folder in my head of like memories of things that I can go, oh, it's June 25th and the fish aren't biting down the lake. Let's go run up to a dam wall and see if there's smallmouth spawning in the rocks. I mean, it's just like crazy crap, but it's the crap that separates, the dudes who are catching them, the dudes who aren't catching.
Yeah. But there's a really cool comment from White Whale Fishing, and he talks about fish being conditioned to the same baits year and year again, right? And as much as I don't want to say like I have a major impact on the fishery, at the same point in time, right? Like every year the spots change, and it'd be kind of dumb of me to say that I have no impact on it. I do think that if I hit the same spot with the same exact bait week in, week out, all year long, and then I come back the next season, I do think that has something to do with it as well, right? Like those fish were probably semi-conditioned because they're probably some of the same fish. Yeah, so that's a pretty cool comment.
Yeah, I there's no doubt. I mean, I've caught fish even this year. Caught again the Ned rig deal. I caught that one fish off that bed, took it 2 miles away, and then she swam right back to that bed. I mean, dude, like I know for a fact that there's fish that are going out of their way to get back into places. And I mean, I've caught them with sores in the roof of their mouth where I've caught them with one thing and then had to switch up and catch them with another thing. But I definitely agree with that. I think that there's definitely some conditioning, and switching up and being a little bit different can help you to catch them.
Yeah. Let's kind of look forward though, like going into next season, are there any techniques that you really want to focus on a little bit more? Are there some techniques that, worked for other guys around you this year and you want to focus on next season? Or like, do you want to just improve or refine? Like what's your plan next year?
I definitely want to, we'll start with improve and refine. I want to refine the Ned rig even more than I have it now. Like I feel like there's so much to learn about that bait that I can do and I can catch fish on. Swim jig. I want to use it more, refine it down, really actually swim it. Because my swim jig experience has been very different. I've not really ever swam a swim jig. I've more flipped it and like used it. Like I swim it, but I don't really swim it. It's kind of like a improvised swim where I'm just making big long pulls with it. You know what I mean? So I definitely want to do that kind of, with the swim jig. And then things that like, obviously the crankbait, I mean, it's going to play. It plays every winter. It plays every spring. Jerkbait plays every winter. It plays every spring. I mean, it's just those things that like, no matter what you do, you got to have it in the boat with you. You know what I mean? And as far as like other baits, it's not really baits. It's more like areas. Like there's things that I kind of discovered last year, maybe at the tail end of it, and only got to do it a few times. That this next coming year, I want to be there before it happens. I want to be there while it's happening. I want to be there after it happens. So I can figure out the whole pattern of fish coming to me, what it looks like, what I need to be doing to more effectively catch fish. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's more my big thing.
Yeah, I'm kind of along the same lines, right? I mean, Ned rig fishing for me probably won't be on my list, but I want to learn the jerkbait a little bit more. I want to understand like what makes the difference between a good jerkbait, like a jerkbait for the very specific condition that I'm fishing versus other conditions. So like really refine that selection. I said it a couple of years ago. I'd like to learn a wobblehead. I think there's a time and place where a wobblehead is really, really effective, and I think it's still slept on. And then finally, the swim jig. I didn't really pick it up this year, but I want to use it as a tool to like actually search for active fish, whether that's smallmouth or largemouth. And I just didn't fish it enough this year.
Yeah, I have to say, there's not anything that I didn't fish this year that I regret not fishing. Like, what was hilarious, and this
I didn't catch him very good on a crankbait this year. That's one thing I didn't really catch him on. I had one really, really phenomenal day with Brennan, but beyond that, I didn't really smash him on it.
Well, what's funny to me, I will add a spinnerbait to my list of things I want to throw more because I feel like a spinnerbait is being overlooked by a lot of people. But anyway, what was funny to me is I guess this is where I fish more kayak tournaments this year, and the dudes I fish around are very open about what they're catching them on. What I noticed was dudes were doing the same exact crap as me. It's just they were in a different part of the lake and would smash my face in. And I lost a bunch of fish this year. And that's something I need to improve on. I don't know why. I mean, there was several situations. I have no idea why I lost fish. Like, I would have them hooked and they would come flying out of the water, and like every possible thing that would go wrong. But man, like, you watch some of those videos. Like, how many 18 to 21 inch fish did I lose this year? I mean, it felt like every kayak tournament I fished in, I would lose the one fish that I needed to get first place. Norris, I did. I mean, every kayak tournament. And so I really need to figure out.
Did I lose you? Might have lost Alex there. I think kind of building on that, though, like I fish pretty clean. I know there's like one fish catch. 100% there's one fish catch that I wish I had back, and that was a fish catch when Brennan was here on a crankbait. And that fish just kind of pulled off. I think I put too much pressure on him, especially because he only had one hook. But for me, it was a pretty decent year as far as like hook to land fish. And so I can't really say that that's one of those things that I would improve or look to improve for next season. I think my biggest thing is just really understanding the areas and fishing a little bit better and understand like the true conditions of what's going on to be better in those spots. Alex said he's coming back. His computer had some issues. But like one of the things that I don't think I did very well this year is like really understanding the areas that I'm fishing. I just kind of went out, threw the baits. I'm like, I know there should be fish here, threw the baits, caught some fish, but I didn't really refine like the reasoning as to why I was catching them as good as I maybe should have. Brennan asked me, he says, you've never fished a wobblehead. No, I fished a wobblehead. It's just not a bait I have a ton of confidence in. And it's one of those things that I want to get better with because I know it's a really, really effective technique. But it's just not something I've thrown a ton. There's been a lot of conversations about the loco and the whippersnapper. I've seen the whippersnapper. I've also seen the loco. I've never fished either one of them, but they look very similar. So I don't know the difference between the two either. I've never fished either one. Oh, and Alex is back.
Dude, I don't know what just happened. My computer just freaked out. Like I lost you and couldn't hear you, and then everything paused, and then it goes and shut down.
Your computer did?
Yes, and then a screen popped up and said your computer shut down because there was a problem. Please wait a moment while it restarts.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know what just happened. That was nuts. Sorry. I was in the middle of a thought, but I have no idea what I was talking about.
Yeah, we were talking about losing big fish this season, and that's not one of those things that I think I did. Like, I had a pretty clean fishing year.
Yeah, I didn't. I don't know why. I lost a lot of big fish this year, and I really don't know why. I don't know if it was, and that's the thing is like I have it all on video, so I would go back and I would watch it. I would let Dad watch it. I mean, I would let people watch it. You would watch it. I'm like, what did I do wrong? And everybody's like, nothing. Like,
just pulled off.
they just pulled off. They just popped off. They just jumped. I mean, it was just crazy. So maybe it's just luck. I mean, like, there's a luck aspect to everything. You know what I mean?
never really lost anything up here. Like this season when you came up here, we fished pretty clean.
Oh yeah. I mean,
this
it was when
the trip sucked. I mean,
well, it was all right.
Relatively, our trip was not as good as it normally
not
is.
as good as it has been. Yeah, but we still did. I mean, we still did good. I will tell you the one constant factor in losing fish for me, kayak. I think you're just at an inherent disadvantage in that kayak. I tell people all the time, kayak fishing makes you better because it makes you intentional. Everything you do has to have intent behind it. Every move, every cast, everything has to have intent. The placement of objects in the kayak, of tools, of gear has to be so intentional. I think if anybody wants to get better at finesse fishing and get way more intentional with their fishing, put yourself in a kayak because it will make you do it.
Oh. You also have to understand how the kayak reacts when you set the hook on a fish and moves when you're fighting a fish. And there's just so many different things, right?
Yep. Oh, there is. I mean, I was watching some footage from yesterday. I was editing my video. I hook into like a 1 pounder. It was a 14-inch fish, and the front of my kayak starts going towards it. And I'm trying to get my handle turned and trying to pedal backwards, and I'm trying to fight this fish with a crankbait. And I mean, he's just that kayak's going right towards him. And I mean, when you hook a 5 pounder, even on a wacky rig, you're going towards that fish. I mean, he's going to pull you around. You know what I mean?
I can't imagine trying to fish out of a paddle kayak and trying to do those same things, right? Like
it's almost dangerous.
I think it would impact like all of the gear that you have to use too. You have to like upsize your rod, set the hook a little bit harder, because you're going to be constantly fighting that fish and fighting the movement towards that fish. So
yeah,
it's interesting that the kayak was the common denominator with you losing those fish.
It was, man. And I don't know if I was doing anything wrong. I mean, I don't know what I could do any better to make it right. I mean, I just think it's just it's like there's one big smallmouth that sticks out in my mind because it was one of the biggest smallmouth that I've ever seen in my life. I mean, even fishing up there with you, dude, this smallmouth was effing giant. All right. The SOB, like here's what happened. I hook him with the Ned rig. He's digging. I've got my drag backed off so that he can just dig and he doesn't want to come up. Well, then he just makes the decision, I'm going to jump. Well, dude, when this smallmouth jumped, in my position in the kayak, he totally slacklines me and literally jumps above my head, like not over me, but like above my head 4 or 5 foot out of the water. And I'm sitting only 3 foot above the water. I mean, so this fish comes up, I watch it go up, and then I watch the Ned rig go one way and he goes the other way. I mean, and dude, in that scenario, like in a boat, you know, you're standing up, you can keep your rod tipped down, you can make those moves. In a kayak, there's nothing you can do about that. Like
at that point,
that fish's whip.
Your rod's up here just praying that the fish doesn't come off.
Yeah. Oh yeah, dude. I mean, I don't know. So it's crazy. I mean, it is crazy. It's kind of the common denominator, but it only means I can get better at it, right? I mean, that has to be my goal next year is to get better at that. And so that's what I'm going to work on is getting better at that.
Is there like a certain technique you'd like to be better at, like grass fishing or rock pile fishing? Or like, is there something like that you'd like to get better at?
Honestly, I'll tell you, like shallow river fishing. Like I'm really good at like dam discharge fishing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm really good at dam discharge fishing, like, you know, getting in that big current, that deeper water. But like the mid-depth stuff, like the moving water, I'm good with that. Like, you know, fishing real shallow, like foot and a half deep, you know, running a spinnerbait or something. I mean, it's hard to mess that up. You're just getting fish to react. But it's like when I get on the backside of that shoal and like I'm in a dead piece of dead water. Like, how do I optimize that area of dead water? You know, because there's fish that live there, and I see 4 and 5 pounders swimming around, but how the hell do I get them to eat? You know, what do I do? Do I fish a swim bait? Do I fish a spy bait? Do I drag a jig? Like, what is that thing that I got to throw in that area to get those fish to react? And I don't really know anybody that's tapped into that. You know, I mean, I fish around a lot of good anglers, and like I've talked to a lot of them about it, and I mean, you know, they're the same as me. They just go find the moving water. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, and I think that's an untapped bite or a bite that doesn't really get talked about as much. But it's going to happen too, right? Like there's going to be times that water does slack off. And so I'm with you. Yeah. I think I would like to get better at like this sounds dumb because it's what a lot of the lakes that I fish are, but like big glacial lake smallmouth. Because I'm pretty good at like small to moderate sized glacial lakes, but like really big glacial lakes, like how do those fish move in position based on those bait fish?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we don't have a ton of them until I go like 2 hours away, 2.5 hours away. But I just think that's like how I'm going to catch a 30-pound bag. I don't know that it's going to happen on the bay, or it would have to be like a perfect storm of days to happen on the bay.
And if you do it on forward-facing sonar, we'll have to put an asterisk by it. So
yeah. If we do it on forward-facing sonar, it basically doesn't count. So I have to learn how to fish those lakes out of a rudimentary john boat with some paddles on it.
That you pulled there with a horse and buggy.
Yeah. No, but I think that's something I'd like to get a lot better at. Is like those big glacial bodies of water.
Well, and I do agree. I think that is where you catch a 30-pound bag. You go find one of those lakes that nobody's really jacked with, or they've jacked with, but they've only messed with it at the bank, and you go find. I mean, dude, that's where the world record spot came from. Suspended over 75 foot over 175 foot. You know what I mean? That's how they won that $1 million was dropping on this. I think that's what you're going to like. Using that forward-facing sonar and hitting fish that literally no one else sees or has hit is what is going to put a 30-pound bag into the boat.
You know what's so funny about that, dude? Is the guy that caught 37 said he caught about a 17 foot of water, 17 to 22, around isolated rock to sand transitions.
Really?
Which is like so typical wintertime smallmouth. Like that is the most typical wintertime smallmouth pattern that you do around here. Yeah. And I'm like, damn. But that guy spends that guy put us in so much time on that lake. He lives out there. He like is out there a couple times a week or whenever he can get out there. And like that is so deserved. But it's just so funny because obviously I think he could have done it without forward facing, but at the same time, like I'm sure it helped. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, anytime you can look at them, it's just like sight fishing for them. When you're looking at them, dude, you can start to learn that pattern, that body language. Like, what are they doing? Why are they doing it? And I mean, I don't know. It's just it's a tool. It's a tool in the tool bag. You put me out there in that same situation, I would have never caught those fish. Promise you.
It's also different experiences, right? Like you coming up here would be like me going down there and trying to catch those river fish. I think it's different experiences, and like that guy would have been successful regardless of whether he had it or not. And for me, like one of the tools that I use a lot is forward facing sonar in my electronics, and I wouldn't be as effective in shallow water as you are. So it's just a matter of like what you're comfortable with, what you're confident in. But that's something I want to grow is my intuition or knowledge of like big giant glacial bodies of water. And obviously continue learning the Great Lakes.
Oh yeah, because dude, let's be honest, like even just the Saginaw Bay, you could never learn it all.
No, you can't learn it all. You can't. It's too big.
Not even in a lifetime. I mean, you could never learn it. I mean, I think even if you broke it down into like a grid and you just like said, I'm going to learn a 10 by 10 by 10, like a 10 by 10 square of this lake, it would take you an entire lifetime just to do that.
It would take me like, I think I did the calculation. If I literally started graphing at 4 miles an hour and I tried to graph every inch of the lake, I think it would take me like 33 years if I never stopped.
That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
Like if I never stopped graphing, it would take me
and there's people who think that there's like that place is small, like that there's unique bites, like that. Dude, this is crazy, man. That's again, there's bass that live there that have never seen a human. They'll live and die and never see a human.
I think Norris Lake has an untapped potential as well.
Absolutely. The place is huge. It's sprawling. It's spidery. I mean, like, dude, it'd take you freaking 2.5, 3 hours to run from the furthest point you can get into a bass boat to the dam. I mean, like, it's huge. I'd believe that too. I think what is so unique about these big reservoirs, like your Norris's, I think what makes them so unique is because there is so much that there can be so many different bites happening all over the place. Like you can go from one creek to one creek to one creek and get a very different bite in every single creek just because of how massive the creeks are. You know what I mean?
But that also makes it so miserably hard because like it's not consistent. So like you go from one creek towards the dam that's really clean, then you go like 25 minutes up the lake because that's how long it takes to get to the next 5 creeks up, like, and it's dirtier water. I think that's such an interesting aspect that you guys have to deal with. Like obviously we have massive bodies of water, but like they're not as sprawling. We don't have creek arms and creek channels and rivers flowing in. Like it's one body of water that takes you 25 minutes to go from one end to the other. Like,
well, and I think another thing you got going for you is the consistency. Like when it hits spawning temperatures, it's like every freaking bass in the lake does that thing because they know they have a limited amount of time to do that thing. Whereas my bass, it's just not that way. You know what I mean? It's like that bite I got on in the back of that creek. That one creek with that water flowing in, no other creek like that on the lake. I go back there, I find them stacked up, I smash them. I'll leave that creek. It's chocolate milk on the rest of the lake, and I don't get a bite the rest of the day. That creek and that creek alone. That's it. Like it's the only place I was able to catch them.
Right.
It's interesting.
It's insane, man. Like the dynamics of fishing is just really, really crazy. Do you have any crazy let's kind of start to wrap this thing up, but do you have any crazy trips planned for 2022? Anything cool planned?
I'm leaving next week to go to the beach. And there's a lake down there that I fish every time that I go down there. It's literally right across the street from the ocean. It's actually the closest fully fresh body of water in the world to the ocean. So like it's like you go anywhere, you're not going to find a lake that's that close to the ocean. You literally take a football from the edge of the lake and throw it, and you're going to hit the ocean with it. Like it's crazy. So I go down there. I've never caught any big ones there. I've fished there 2 years in a row. I mean, I'm sure there's some big fish in that place.
Have they said there are big ones in there?
Yeah, I mean, there's been 10, 11, 12 pounders caught down there. And like you can also have the chance of catching giant redfish and speckled trout too, which I want to try. In the lake, yeah, they move because the lake has access to salt water.
So it can't be fully fresh water.
No, it's fully fresh because there's enough fresh water pouring in from the other end that it forces the salt water back and like holds it. And there's a point at which the salt water and the fresh water start to blend and become brackish. Yeah, it's pretty cool. But the saltwater canal that leads into there is so narrow and there's not enough water that can get through that canal. And the canal's like, I don't know, like 6-7 miles long. But they say if you get close to that canal, like one flip with a wacky rig could be a bass, and the next flip could be a redfish, and the next fish could be a flounder, and the next one could be a speckled trout. So I want to figure that out. But yeah, I go down there. I mean, I've never caught any big ones, 2-3 pounders, but you catch a shit ton of them. Because when we get down there, they're like getting ready to spawn. So I'm starting to catch a bunch of pre-spawners and buck bass, and so I can just go down there and hammer them.
Are you taking a mag draft? Are you taking like a big swim bait with you?
I might. I don't know. I could probably go. The problem is, dude, the whole freaking lake is like that deep. So like, and it's grassy, you know what I mean? And it's like, I'm sure there's bass out in the middle of the lake somewhere, but you could probably go around in circles for days and never find them. And so what I focus on are the canals. There's big canals that connect each lake. You can go in those canals and just hammer them. But I'm doing that. That's kind of the first trip. And then me and Bethany's trying to plan a big trip out west. We want to go way out west and take the kayaks with us and just hit lakes along the way. We want to go all the way to Colorado. So we want to hit a bunch of lakes and rivers on the way out there. Outside of that, though, I mean, obviously coming up there with you, I think we're going to do a monster bass meetup in March on Chick. I don't know, man. I mean, you know how it is. I plan stuff like a month before it happens. Like,
yeah, I know. I'm like already looking out into next year because I used to be like the most lackadaisical planner. I would just be like, hey, yeah, come up to Michigan whenever you get time. Now with kids, I'm like, okay, so I got this trip planned, and then I have this and that, and I'm like 6 months out already and starting to look into it. But yeah, no, I feel that. I don't have any major trips planned. I don't know. I'm sure Caleb will come back up again. I'd love to go to Iowa and fish Mississippi with Brandon. If I can make that happen, it's just going to depend on everything.
What we need to do is we need to make that my yearly trip up north, and I'll go with you. You know what I mean? Like
Iowa?
Yeah, go to Iowa.
Go to Iowa. Canada. I really want to go to Canada again.
Is Canada open? Can we go to Canada?
So it's so hit or miss. Like one day it'll be open, the next day it'll be closed.
Yeah, and I'm not getting into Canada, and then they decide to close it.
No, that's the reason I didn't go this fall. Is because it's like you could go over there, and then all of a sudden they close the border. Like you were in contact with a sea patient. And, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, thank you. A sea patient. Can't say the word because we'll get demonetized.
So
that's for real, though. I did get one live demonetized because I said that damn word, which is amazing that in an hour-long live stream they can pick that up. But what do I know?
Yeah. Also, I guess one more thing. I'd love to learn how to fish it better, like be better with a big swim bait or like even a mid-sized paddle tail swim bait. I'm not talking like a big 8-inch swim bait, but like a paddle tail or like a hollow belly. Because I can catch them occasionally, but I can't like consistently go out and just have success with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I there's that lake we were talking about.
Yep.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about it because I don't want anybody to get a hold of it. There's a whole when we get off here, I'll tell you about it. There's a whole system of lakes. Not just that one. There's a whole system of lakes over there that are all the same. But I want to go figure that out. And it seems to be a big swim bait thing. And I feel like I don't know. We'll figure it out. I mean, we'll just have to see how that all works out. I'm going to go figure that out because it's totally worth it. You know what I mean?
Our boy Victor, he asked, have you ever fished in the UP? I have. I spent a little bit of time up there this fall. I went up to a lake called Brevoort. Didn't have a ton of success. And then I actually took a trip, my annual fall trip. We went up to, I guess it's Hessel Bay, but there's like a name for that whole region. And that just absolutely was miserable. Like, I don't know if we caught it too late. I don't know what happens with those fish, but we caught like 3 or 4 smallmouth in 3 days. Those fish just totally moved out of those bays and moved out towards the Great Lakes. Alan Mackey says Washington State is an absolutely awesome smallmouth fishery.
I want to go to
We've been seeing so many big fish caught out of Washington State, Idaho, and Oregon. It is like, Alex and I were talking about this. It's insane.
What was that? What was that last state you said?
Oregon.
Oregon.
It's Oregon Trail.
Oregon. It's the Oregon Trail.
It's an O. Oregon.
O-R makes the or sound. Oregon. Oregon.
Anyways, yeah, awesome smallmouth fisheries out west. Columbia River.
Penis. How do you pronounce penis?
Penis.
Penis, damn it. Yeah, no, I for sure want to go to Washington. I want to go out there and check all of that crap out because that's just
We talked about that. That would be such a cool trip. It's just so far. Like it's such a commitment. You would have to like really make the decision or know someone out there with a boat or like it'd be so hard.
What's crazy?
To go out there and try and catch it.
What's crazy is I feel like it would be easier for us to go to Japan than it would to go to like the western part of the United States.
I think so too.
Like I really do. Like I feel like
it would take less time. Like if we wanted to fly out to Japan, it would take less time flying to Japan and meeting someone and getting on a boat than it would to drive to Washington. It would take like it's like I say it would take like 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like 48 hours. It's insane.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I don't know. I mean, I want to do both. I want to go out west and I want to go to Japan.
I want to go to Japan so bad. That's one of those trips I want to go just because like I want to see the culture, not even just the fishing, like the culture and like the lifestyle and like what feeds into the fishing culture to be the way that it is, right? Yeah. Because there's a lot of like sneakiness that's constantly coming out of Japan. Also, like the American market in Japan is funny because they look at what we do as like super revered, and we look at what they do as like super revered and like secretive.
What's funny is I follow these dudes that own a shop over. It's a skate shop and a bait shop, and the same thing. It's awesome, and they are obsessed with the OG Slim. And like, dude, they are like, I was like, you looking at the translate on Instagram, and they're like freaking out because they got OG Slims. And I'm like, man, we've been making OG Slims. Like that was a bait before that was a bait, like here in East Tennessee. But it kind of makes sense. They love balsa. They love that's like sneaky, quiet crankbait stuff. I mean, because it works, because the fish are so pressured. But no, that's cool. Yeah, I would like, dude, for real. We need to do that. Like, life is too short to just talk about doing it. We really do need to plan a trip to Japan and just go. I mean, just take a week and let's go to Japan. We're going to have to take an empty suitcase and $2,000 in cash just for the tackle, but we need to go.
That would be so cool. I would like dress with the clothes on my back. I'd put like 3 layers of clothes on just so I didn't have to put it in the bag.
Just peel them off as you go.
Yeah, exactly. Just leave the clothing there.
That's funny.
Oh, but yeah, that's the way I think we're going to end this thing, man. I think that kind of gives us a good look into 2022 and kind of look back at 2021, which was just a really weird season, man. Like, really thinking about it was such a weird year. I never got on a lipless bite, never got on a swim jig bite. Like, the baits that I threw were kind of out of my comfort zone if you really start to think about, like, the baits that I threw consistently. And like the jerk bait, I really started to dial it in and like learn that bait aside from just looking at them on live scope, because that's how I always use that bait. The little spin head, like the jig obviously was a major confidence tool, but the way that I was using it flipping deep grass was different.
Yeah.
So, just really interesting, different year.
Yeah, it was. I mean, 2020 was strange. I mean, I spent a lot of time on the water because of everything that went on. And then like 2021, man, it was like, it was weird, dude. I mean, like, I did so many things I've never done before and weird stuff, like weird ways to
crazy
catch
opportunities.
Yeah, it was just weird. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. 2022 is going to be good. It's going to be a blessed year. I mean, everything should just work out the way it should. I mean, we're gonna kick her right in the nads, boy, and I mean, we just gonna let her rip.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. Yeah. So thank you, everyone, for listening to the podcast forum or checking us out live. This was live on my YouTube channel. So go over, check out the YouTube channel if you're listening on podcast, and vice versa if you guys are listening in live right now. But as always, thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Alex, for hopping on. We will talk to you guys later, and take care, Taillights. God bless. Pursue passion.
Bye.
Bye.